Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, ni hao, buenos dias, heseche, akwaba, welcome, what up though? Yeah, there's another addenda to the agenda, because I have yet to get it like I got to. So, what I share on this occasion is examples. I was working for that before. A lot of this is Freudian, and so there are blocks mentally in expressing this, but it's relevant universally, um, and thus is purposeful, and thus I persevere. Gumbaru. So here it is, examples, what I'm talking about. So the topic again for review, for refresher, is manipulation and honesty. Particularly manipulation from people who seem to support us, but only support us in ways that are unfavorable for ourselves. Subjugating, subordinating, patronizing, matronizing, haha, all that. So here we go. Examples. I also mentioned, again, preface. I also mentioned the three stages of like points in one's life where this becomes this has a tendency of coming to a head. One is schooling, education, preparing for a career. Another one is relationship-wise, preparing for marriage. And another one is being in marriage, being a spouse, and then having children and preparing children to continue the cycle. In each of those occasions, there's a necessity of compromise, of decision making, and big decisions. And people have try to have a hand in the say of what those decisions are within an individual's life. Again, a lot of it's relevant and appropriate, and a lot of it is BS. So the consideration is how we navigate through all those elements to be who we're supposed to be in this life. Examples. So when we talk about that first stage numero uno of the student stage of preparing for career, I'll give the example from Malcolm Shabazz. In his autobiography, Malcolm Shabazz describes his childhood, tough childhood, essentially goes into a foster care, but even then he thrives. He actually is a standout student, president of his class in elementary school, mid-elementary school, straight A student, thereabouts. So very, very accomplished as a young student, a young prospect. And he describes how at one occasion the teacher assigns to the class to write down what they want to be in life, what kind of profession they want to be. And so Malcolm says he wants to be a lawyer. Very logical for a president of the class, top of the class. So then, as is depicted within Spike Lee's film Malcolm X, the teacher brings Malcolm to the side alone and has like a tete-a-tete with Malcolm and says, Malcolm, we like you. I ain't gonna do the second person thing. The teacher says that everybody likes Malcolm. He's a nice student. He gets along with everybody, so people appreciate him. But facing facts, he's African, and being a lawyer is perceived as an implausible prospect for an African, and that instead he's decent with his hands. He's nice with physical labor. He should be a carpenter. And Malcolm is dismayed by this. He's like, I get the top grades. I'm the president of the class. A person who does this is supposed to be like a lawyer. What are you talking about being a carpenter? And then so the teacher describes something about, Jesus was a carpenter. And so that's an example of the manipulation I'm talking about. It's not a categorical like, no. It's a, we like you. We want what's best for you, but we just think you have to be sensible. Recognize what the conditions are, and it's not us. We don't want. This is not what we want, but it's just the best we can do. So now there's a certain legitimacy within that, but then there's a whole lot of BS, and that's very discouraging for Malcolm. So what does he become? Malcolm X. So that's one example of the manipulation, where it's pimp talk It's that soothing kind of thing, but then it's also demeaning and devaluing, even dehumanizing. It's predatory. So that's one example of stage one, stage numero uno. Another example is Mozart, and this gets into a quasi stage one, stage two kind of joint. So Mozart, as to be honest, I mean, has a reputation during his lifetime of being one who indulges in his interactions with women and substances, but is a genius when it comes to music, and as is evident or as is depicted within the film Mozart, or Amadeus actually is called. Um, the manner in which he dies is from sickness, is from fatigue, because a teacher of his, one who's giving him guidance, is supposed to like be helping him to do what he does, share his craft, actually abuses him mentally, and just works him to death, because the teacher is jealous. And this is a lot of depicted of what's depicted in the film, and it's a theatrical depiction, but it's based on actual facts, so people can discern or confirm the actuality, the veracity of these things. But the consideration, the main point is the teacher being jealous of Amadeus, and instead of having what's in Amadeus's best interest, and like saying, okay, well, it's time to settle down. Let's think about getting you married and having a family, and living a long life of being in the community, everything, whilst you continue to do this craft. That wasn't the situation. It was like, yo, bleed you to death. Like a second person again. We're not going to bleed you to death. The teacher bleeds Amadeus to death through sweat and toil and stress, and always demanding, oh, we got to do further. Oh, this got to be perfect. Oh, it's got to be this. And so that's another example of that type of manipulation. And when someone's in the stage of having a career, additionally, but the people who are advisors and authority figures in giving support and guidance in that career do it in a very selfish way. It can be for personal, again, insecurity reasons, but also be like for the purpose of just churning out a product and maximizing that, not caring about the individual's well-being, and just getting what one can get from that person, and whatever happens to that person, whatever. And so we can find that very readily in throughout the spectrum of socioeconomic occupations, from corporate raiders and executives being overworked, with the motto of work hard, play hard. I am admonishing that. I'm saying from love the people, but that notion requires some additional consideration. And I have dear loved ones who proclaim that as well. But anyways, that's one example. But even like cats who work in the field, cats who work in the factory, and additionally, are perceived often as just cogs, without due consideration about people's lives, and relationships, and responsibilities and obligations and well-being. So that's another example of manipulation. And again, it can be very obvious, but then it's particularly when it's not obvious, when it seems to come from somebody who seems to have our interest but actually doesn't. So that's another example. There's one other example. Well, there's another example of stage two joints. So this ain't necessarily a specific example, but it's like a further description. So it's like a tangible scenario. Another scenario that applies increasingly specifically towards the stage two, stage dos kind of situation of marriage, relationship, and the kind of shade and manipulation that's involved. An example is if when an individual, let's say a woman, a girl, is effectively the emotional punching bag of a family, meaning that the family gets stress from outside factors, the community, competition, whatever else, and is unable to like inflict it on others. And that's a tendency that humans tend to do when getting pain is seemingly inflicted from others, and not being able to like inflicting back in a balanced way than inflicting it on who's available. Abusing, let's call it abuse. When experiencing abuse from others and not being able to dish it out, or finding somebody else outside the family or outside the community to dish it out on, then it's dished out often on the ones who are closest to the individual or to the ones experiencing the abuse. And it might be a spouse towards another spouse, but it's often parent towards child. And additionally, and so this is a scenario. It can be a son, it can be a daughter, but in this case, we're going to go with a daughter. In this case, the daughter is a punching bag for the family. The parents might be abusive in a mental way, and just kind of it might not it's physical abuse. No, it's just emotional abuse. Just continually insulting the person, always speaking limitedly or limitationally, meaning that I don't know if you could, if that, I gotta watch the rhetoric again. Always questioning whether the person can actually do something, regardless of what it is, or maybe particularly if it's something that seems to be threatening the family's hold over the individual. If the person can draw, what can the person do with drawing? And because they're concerned, one, that they're just hateful, and so it's abusive. But then also, if the person is successful in drawing, then the person is less dependent upon the parents as the person grows up. So, oh yeah, drawing, yeah, I don't know. So, and they're amidst those conditions, which might be considered rather frequent, too frequent. Then there's consideration of siblings picking up on that. When siblings experience abuse, they see how the parents treat the punching bag, and similarly are somewhat leveraged in fending off the abuse that they experience. So they punch on the punching bag too, the emotional punching bag. And this has a tendency of going on for years and years and years, to the point where the punching bag can be resilient, and graduate, and even go to university, even get graduate degrees and medical degrees and law degrees and PhDs and whatever else, but still be emotionally dependent upon the punches, particularly at the prospect of nuptials, being married with somebody else, because again, that's when the individual becomes increasingly dependent, and even increasingly dependent emotionally, because in being married with somebody else, now they're getting strength, they're getting affirmation, encouragement, support, so that one, the punching bag is less dependent upon the punching bag's family for that type of emotional intimacy or emotional proximity and support, but also resilient against the abuse of, like, yo, this is abuse, this is not right. So what would the family do without that individual? So the family cast shade. Oh, you want to get married? Second person again. Cast shade about doubts about the person getting married, insecurities about the person's qualifications, and this, that, and the other, and doing other things. Well, who's gonna like somebody who's done this or done that? We know the ins and outs, the nitty gritty. So there's all these types of emotional power plays and manipulation, everything else like that. That's just another example, and that's a description rather than a tangible example, but I think it provides an increasing illustration of conditions and situations at stage dos. Then we get into stage tres. The person gets married, and the sister has a husband, and the two have children, and now the parents are planning for the raising of the children. But again, like I said in the previous joint, this is when the parents have to negotiate and cooperate with the surrounding community, and that means being susceptible to the manipulation, because human beings are predatory. Um, and there's a tendency of continually looking how to get something out of somebody else in one way or another. Yes, there's altruism. Yes, there's love and empathy and sympathy and compassion, honesty and modesty and genuine giving, and additionally, um, yet there's a significantly pervasive culture and tendency of predatoriness. And so with that predatoriness becomes manipulation, because now in order to get into, like I said, the public school, it's a public school, so there's that. But then it's a matter of having a relationship with the teacher, so that the teacher is actually has a certain vested interest in the well-being of the student, because that's not necessarily a guarantee, and that's a significant factor in the raising of a child, the early development of a child, what the teacher, how the teacher guides that process, inspires, instills encouragement and confidence and knowledge of self, and additionally, and so um, in the conditions that many teachers experience, public school and private school otherwise, there are a lot of pressures. It can be difficult and very trying for teachers. And so, anyways, all that being said, um, at some point the parents become dependent upon the relationship with the teacher, and that can be a vulnerability for manipulation, of playing favorites, playing the game, playing the role, and additionally, particularly when there are considerable differences between the parents and the family of the parents, and then either the school, the teacher, or the community in which the teacher and the school exist, because those differences can be, and the intention of maintaining those differences, whether it's ethnic and cultural differences, whether it's religious differences and otherwise, um, that can be utilized as a premise for um, subordination, subjugation, and manipulation that facilitates that. So, if the child is having, this is a typical example amongst mixed people, Mélanger brethren, if the person has a lunch that smells different than everybody else, oh well, if you want to get along with everybody else, second person again. If the child wants to get along with everybody else, the child should bring something that's appropriate to school. That's manipulation right there. It's predatory. Uh, and but then it gets even further deeper, because particularly when the parents and the family attempt the ascension through socioeconomic hierarchy, private school, even parochial, and additionally, the level of scrutiny and the level of mind games is a whole nother level, because now it's not a matter of bringing in lunches that smell the same as everybody else. It's a matter of aptitude, of um, learning perception or a diagnosis of learning disabilities, slowness of development, and all these other coded kind of concepts, and additionally, that are kind of just the surface level pretenses for discrimination, and subordination, meaning if the child is intended to be and perform like the other students, then there's a necessity of the parents, the family, and the child conforming to what the other students are doing. That's manipulation. Um, and it's very, particularly in American U.S. culture, it is very nuanced. It's very passive aggressive, because the laws on the book state that such discrimination is illegal. However, it's not phrased in that way. It's phrased in a matter of, again, aptitude, uh, uh, and the other terms that I just mentioned, linguistic um, proficiency, and additionally, rather than genuinely supporting a child that is multilingual, and perhaps the development curve along those lines, particularly at younger age, and providing an environment that supports that, and tools that support that and that accentuate that. and having materials that are multiculturally um, uh, supportive as well. Meaning, and it's not a matter about being PC and having all the bases covered over. It's like recognizing like a child thrives when a child sees the child's self readily in the material that is given to the child. And yes, children are increasingly honest when it comes to race, ethnicity, and politics. And so children have less are increasingly compassionate universally. Yes, that's the case. However, when the materials are consistently um, monoethnic, monoethnic, monolinguistic, mono uh, religious, to whatever degree it is, in a way that's distinct from the child's own. Um, that's it's a significant amount of conditioned behavior for certain doubts emerging, certain self um, resentment, insecurity, and additionally, that manifests into uh, challenges of performance in general ways. So, anyways, the consideration is being aware of this and preparing students, preparing children, equipping children, supporting children, nurturing children with materials, with stories, with messaging, with guidance that is affirmational within the child's own heritage background, and respectful of the heritages and backgrounds of others. So that's where we emphasize the Mélanger methodology, the Mélanger approach, the Mélanger experience of pluralism, and that's the go-to thing that I work towards articulating in the previous parts of this Mélanger Cafe Mélanger joint. Um, it is a matter of providing ourselves at each of these stages, uno, dos, and tres, with a strengthened knowledge of self. Knowledge of self being knowledge of the eternal that exists within us and that we continue to perpetuate in this universe. And doing that through wisdom and righteousness. Wisdom being our songs, the knowledge of our songs, the ancient songs that our ancestors share with us, the stories that our ancestors share with us that tell us about the principles and the people that precede us and that prop us, and the rituals, the things that we do on a regular basis, whether it's daily, whether it's weekly, whether it's upasata based, whether it's monthly, whether it's yearly, all that, the things that we do as a collective through the ages, through the generations, dor vador, that strengthen that experience. The songs, the stories, and the rituals. That's the wisdom. And then the righteousness is the ethical discipline, how we behave, how we engage with each other in this life, in an honest way, in a prosperous way, in a harmonious way, in a just way. So when we do that, then we are increasingly resilient amidst the hostilities, amidst the manipulations, the attempted manipulations, because when we have a strong knowledge of self, of the eternal, but also the legacy that we each are derived from and that we each continue, and the purpose that we have in continuing that legacy, then we have a greater idea, a greater understanding, a greater appreciation, a greater proximity with our value. And when we have an understanding of our value, then the tables are balanced. Regardless of what the conditions are, regardless of what the systems are, regardless of the institutions, the numbers, minority, majority, privilege, pupa, and all that, we have a knowledge of our value. And then we are able to better negotiate with others beyond the manipulation. We are less susceptible. We are increasingly persevering beyond the manipulation. It involves honesty. It ain't a matter of getting over on others and just reciprocating that type of predatory tendency. Honesty is balance. Honesty is fairness. Um, and through that honesty, there is constancy. Constance. Constance. Constancy. Regardless what you call it, it stays the same. So, that's it. So, in short, in summation, what I share is this. We begin at this moment now by stacking our patience chips. Just to be patient, to be able to receive the solution. So to be patient, we be still, we be quiet, we be honest. In our honesty, we better see the conditions, understand the conditions, and our place in the conditions, our purpose in the conditions. What our skills are, and also what we need, what the tools are that we need to continue on. The primary tools are our songs, stories, and rituals, and the methodology through which we share, through which we utilize our skills and these tools is the ethical discipline. So in Melange, I share honesty, sobriety, veganism, marital fidelity, ethical economics, cincofold, fivefold, and I'm gonna keep it at that. So that's the gist of it. And it's through this that we are less susceptible to the manipulation. We persevere beyond the manipulation, even when we repeat ourselves, because that's the nature of life. Namaste, assalamu alaikum, shalom, zaijian, adios, te jakaris, esempina asmo, kele ufred. One love and peace.